Hope everyone is enjoying at least in San Francisco, it's really, really beautiful out. And we'll wait maybe another minute or so, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and say, where you're coming from in California, and maybe your favorite tree. And yeah, so this Naturehood Gardening webinar is all about tips for native trees. I mean, we've just gone through a good round of winter storms, so this is really a relevant topic for, California and for our winter so far. So I'm super excited to have, let me go to the next slide. Oh, it's like editing my, oh yeah, I'm super excited to have Joshua at from Cypress Lawn Arboretum. And he's been the Arboretum director at Cypress Lawn Memorial Park for 4 years, and as an inaugural arborist in the position since Cypress Lawn was first recognized as an accredited arboretum through the Global ArbNet program in 2019. Sorry, I really butchered that sentence. But as speaker for the trees at the cemetery founded in Colma, California in 1892, Josh manages tree care throughout the property, hosts a wide variety of educational and cultural programs, leads community outreach efforts as a local ambassador for the Cypress Lawn Heritage Foundation, and embraces his purpose of fostering kinship between people and trees. Josh is a certified arborist through the Western chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture, with an interdisciplinary educational background from UC Davis's College of Biological Sciences and UC Berkeley's College of Environmental Design, as well as a fellow of the Geraldine Knight Scott Traveling Scholarship. And in the chat, I will post a link to the Arboretum website, and so you all can explore more about Cypress Lawn. So thanks again, Josh, for joining us. Super excited to hear all that you have to say about trees and taking care of them. I'm gonna stop sharing. And now I think you're able to share.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the intro, Maya.
I know, I think I rushed through that a bit, but
It's all good. All right.
takes a moment. Yep, we can totally see it. So
Wonderful.
yeah,
Okay, I'll get going then.
go for it.
It's wonderful to be with you all. Thanks so much, Maya, for the opportunity. I'm really glad to speak to CNPS and share a bit about what I do. I'm going to focus today the theme of my talk on veterans and companions, that being veteran trees, and companions are little seedlings, their neighbors. Seasons of Stewardship at Cypress Lawn Arboretum. This is a photo of the property with actually the gravesite of our founder, Hamden Holmes Noble, in the foreground there. And you can really see just from this one vantage point the diversity of trees that are present at Cypress Lawn, many of them, of course, non-natives. But today I'm going to be focusing my talk a lot on the California native namesake of Cypress Lawn, the Monterey cypress, or Hesperocypris macrocarpa. So I'll dive right in. Let's see here. 1 second. Okay. So here's a few more photos of Cypress Lawn. The foundational East Campus is that photo on the upper right-hand side. You can see the entry archway. And there's a few other images there of Monterey cypresses, and on the bottom row, that left-hand image is a cork oak, Quercus suber, which is one of the most phenomenal specimens on the grounds of the cemetery, and I believe actually maybe a state champion tree in California. So a bit of background before I dive into kind of the focus of my talk, just about Cypress Lawn as a memorial park and an arboretum. The property, as Maya was saying in my introduction, was founded in 1892, so it's 132 years old now. And prior to becoming a cemetery arboretum, the land historically was cattle ranch land. For those that don't know about a bit of the history of the city of Colma, which is about 15 minutes south of San Francisco, it's called a necropolis. It really is a city of cemeteries. Over 75% of the acreage in the town is cemetery property. And it was incorporated in 1924, celebrating its centennial this year, this summer. And Colma was really established due to the population expansion of the San Francisco Bay Area after the gold rush. And as this was happening in the later years of the 1800s, it became very apparent that the city could not support having cemeteries within the grounds of the city. And so San Francisco actually banned burials in the year 1901. And many of the bodies were brought down to Colma and thus became the necropolis. An interesting fact about Cypress Lawn is that the original sections were laid out and planted with trees from all around the world before the first interment took place. So trees are really a piece of the origin story of the property. And technically it was an arboretum before it was a cemetery. So just a little fun fact. Today, Cypress Lawn comprises over 300 acres of land with more than 4,000 trees, 150 woody taxa from all around the world, and many native species. So I did want to share just a few notable decedents of Cypress Lawn. These 4 individuals are all, were all profoundly impactful in the kind of establishment of the urban forest of San Francisco. And I'll just go through some of these facts later. And I hope I can share my slides to you all after the fact as well. So I mentioned the name Hamden Noble before. He is the founder of Cypress Lawn and was an avid plant collector in his time. And I've really inherited in my role as Arboretum Director today the legacy of that planting that he initiated over 100 years ago. Hamden Noble actually hired a man by the name of Mattrop Jensen to be the superintendent of Cypress Lawn in 1902. Mattrop served in that role for just 2 years before migrating to the same role at a neighboring cemetery called Olivet in 1904, where he served until his passing. Mattrop Jensen was the first mayor of Colma and helped to incorporate the city, as I said, in 1924. And what's interesting now is in the year 2021, Cypress Lawn actually acquired Olivet Cemetery. So now all of those trees that were planted by both Noble and Jensen so many years ago are under the same stewardship, which I'm very fortunate to lead. A friend of Jensen's was a very influential man in kind of the early planting of San Francisco's trees, John McLaren, who served as the superintendent of Golden Gate Park for over half a century, was the planter of about 2 million trees in his lifetime, which is something aspirational for myself. And John McLaren is buried at Cypress Lawn right next to a gigantic Monterey cypress tree that I fondly refer to as Uncle John's tree number 2. If you go into Golden Gate Park, some of you may know this, McLaren lived in the park. Today it's referred to as McLaren Lodge, but right out front of that building is a tree, a Monterey cypress, that's known as Uncle John's tree and has been the official city holiday tree since 1929. He planted that tree himself in 1880. The last name I'll mention is Helene Stribing. Stribing Arboretum is the original name of San Francisco Botanical Garden, of which Helene was the primary philanthropist for back in 1926. Very grateful for her legacy as well. So, as I mentioned, the native namesake of the cemetery, Cypress Lawn, is the Monterey cypress. The image on the right here is actually of McLaren's monument, and you can see that big cypress tree in the background there. And the other two trees are both on our east campus and are well over 100 years old. So now this is not the funnest part of the talk, but I'm going to talk about first kind of framing our conversation of stewardship through what happens when stewardship is not enacted. So reactive tree service. These are some, I guess, war story images of the 23 storms that really rocked us. We lost over 40 full trees due to root failure in that storm. And I think many of these failures in hindsight were quite predictable based on the deferred maintenance of the canopy of these trees and also due to their age. The majority of trees at Cypress Lawn, though we're working on it, are in that post-mature age class. A couple more failure images. This was a really interesting one where the main trunk of the tree basically split in half, and one side of the stump remained intact, but the rest of the tree fell over. I'm showing these images of which required reactive tree service to frame the notion of proactive care that I now lead. The first step, really, I think, in proactive tree service is to understand the plants that you're caring for. And we did that just this past year through a property-wide tree risk assessment survey. I'm a qualified tree risk assessor. The track credential is kind of an advanced credential of the consulting arborist realm. I think that the key element to know about risk assessment in trees is to identify hazards, and particularly for these trees that are in that post-mature age class from the era of planting of McLaren and Jensen and Noble. By doing this survey and understanding the condition of many of our post-mature trees, it allows for informed management of risk mitigation measures, specifically for the Monterey cypress, including end weight reduction, which I'll talk about in just a bit. And in some cases, a risk assessment survey may just inform you of priorities for proactive removal of trees. And that doesn't necessarily have to be all sad. And I'll share some of the resilient stories about wood reclamation and creative reuse of trees that need to be removed towards the end of my talk. So in going from reactive storm response to proactive tree service, I'm going to focus on three kind of key elements of the practice of arboriculture that we do at Cypress Lawn. The first of those is structural pruning, which for the Monterey cypress is quite particular and unique due to the vast stature of some of these old trees and their unique biological characteristics, which I'll get into in my next slide. Then I'm going to share some about support systems, including pipe supports, cables, and through bolts. And finally, I'll touch on root crown excavations, which are a particularly important measure to conduct in a mostly turf landscape like Cypress Lawn Arboretum is. So this photo here is of a over 100-year-old Monterey cypress on our west campus, which was established in the 1920s. With Monterey cypresses, one of the key aspects of structural pruning that we do is end weight reduction, which essentially means going out to the far reaches of the limbs and reducing those branches to to decrease the length of the lever arm that the branch is in when it's exposed to extreme wind events. That's typically what causes these failure events, branch failures, is an overextended branch. Monterey cypresses are only able to put on new growth at the end of their branches. They don't have what we refer to as latent buds. So they're not able to resprout from a woody piece of their branch system. So really the most critical aspect of structural pruning for Monterey cypresses is that end weight reduction. And I'll stress here that a key practice of arboriculture, especially with big trees like this, is that pruning is a process, a recurring process. It's not a one-time event. When I first came on board at Cypress Lawn about 4 years ago, there was quite a bit of deferred maintenance where these trees hadn't been cared for proactively in perhaps decades. So those first couple of seasons of stewardship, it was all about getting back on track through that informed risk assessment survey. And now many of our trees are back in a healthy place where we can do routine maintenance as a part of that recurring process, and extend their lifespans, hopefully by many decades. The next subject I want to talk about in terms of proactive stewardship of trees is support systems. This is not a Monterey cypress. It's a southern magnolia, which is also on our original East Campus. Here we have a pretty interesting case study. I've never seen this anywhere around the world, and I've visited many cemeteries both across the United States and in Europe. This is a situation where the magnolia actually had a partial failure maybe 75, 80 years ago, and came to rest one of its main stems on a headstone. And Mr. Jones there is actually serving at his monument is serving as a support for the tree. And on the back side of the tree in this image, we see a more traditional pipe support, which was proactively installed. I noticed one time while I was visiting this tree on a tour of the property with some members of the public, that the branch system on the back side of the tree actually had a large crack and was oozing sap. And we were able to respond very quickly and install a pipe support within a week or so. And in returning a couple weeks after the pipe support was installed, the oozing had stopped. And that branch system has proactively been saved from what would have been a major failure event that could have created a vast wound with potential for fungal pathogens to infect the tree, and may have even initiated kind of what we refer to as a death spiral, where the tree may have eventually had to be removed. So in this case, through a support system, we've hopefully extended the lifespan of this tree by many years. The last piece that I want to touch on in terms of proactive care is what we refer to as a root crown excavation and a mulching. The image right in the top middle is how pretty much all trees looked at Cypress Lawn before we installed any of these mulch rings, with turf all the way up to the trunk. And that can inhibit gas exchange in the root system of the tree, and actually in a way kind of suffocate it. So by exposing that flare of the primary root zone and allowing oxygen into that root system area, the gas exchange of the mature tree is greatly benefited. Another benefit of installing a mulch ring is to create really a barrier from around the trunk of the tree to out at the edge of the mulch ring, which could go as far as the drip line, as you can see that central lower image. The drip line refers to basically the edge of the canopy of the tree down to the soil level. And the roots may extend far beyond that, three to five times beyond the drip line, which is kind of an underappreciated truth about root systems of mature trees, that they can be so vast. And a lot of that is out of sight, out of mind. With the mulch ring concept and arboriculture practice really cares for that root system. And when I refer to the barrier from mechanical damage, I'm referencing mowers and string trimmers, which are, of course, at a cemetery used all the time to maintain the turf. Once the mulch ring is present, it's very easy to just kind of buzz around the perimeter of the ring with a string trimmer to maintain the turf. And it prevents from the potential for breaking through the bark into the living cambium of the tree with a mechanical tool like a string trimmer. So it's a protective measure. And then the third key benefit from a root crown excavation is from the mulch itself. As that material decomposes in situ over time, the nutrients available in that woody biomass may actually feed right back into the tree through the root system. So these drawings are of the tree that's shown in a photograph on the right-hand side, and it happens to be my particular favorite Monterey cypress on the whole grounds. So I do want to talk about, as I referred to earlier, the potential for giving trees a second life, even when they are lost in storms. I think there are three kind of basic components of that possibility. On the left-hand side, you'll see what we would call a habitat spar, where that's actually a Monterey pine, a geographic sister species of the Monterey cypress. But that pine spar is left behind after that tree was actually condemned in that risk assessment that we conducted in 2023. Instead of removing it completely and grinding out the stump and making it essentially just disappear, we chose to leave a habitat spar at 25 feet in height. And that can actually serve as a perch for a number of different birds, especially the raptor population that is very prevalent at Cypress Lawn. The middle image there is a reclaimed Monterey cypress bench right outside of Noble Chapel, which is named after our founder. And there is also, of course, cypress mulch underneath those benches. And then on the right-hand side of this slide is actually a drawing of a proposed tree sculpture, which I hope to commission by the artist Anthony Hines May this summer. And I hope that with those kind of programs that we're not only giving trees a second life, but inviting kind of a cultural presence to the cemetery in a whole new light. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about wood reclamation practices that we are currently doing. I think perhaps the most important aspect of proactive care, proactive tree stewardship, now taking place at Cypress Lawn, as I referenced earlier, the majority of the living collection at Cypress Lawn is in that post-mature age class, and we kind of have a demographics issue where most of our trees are old and will, no matter how much proactive stewardship we do, be lost, 50 years from now. So we'll extend their lifespans, but it's very important to plant that next generation. So the notion of a companion tree, which you can see in the left-hand image of a Monterey cypress as well, that's largest, in the background there, that's the largest Monterey cypress on our entire property. It's over 130 inches in diameter at breast height. But the companion for it in the foreground there will hopefully be alive well past my own season of stewardship of the cemetery. And the Arboretum Heritage Project, which has become really, I think, the heartbeat of my stewardship at Cypress Lawn into the future. The vision for that is to plant companion trees throughout the property for many of our veteran individuals. The one on the right-hand side there is a blue Atlas cedar. And the image in the middle is a Monterey cypress seedling that was propagated in collaboration with Devil Mountain Wholesale Nursery. And in particular, my friend Dave Teschler, who is one of their lead propagators. This image here on the right-hand side, you can see a liner tray of Pioneer pot little liners, which is a really fascinating system of cultivating plant material with a permeable wall to the edge of the tray, so that it avoids girdling roots. But those are little Monterey cypresses from a batch of cones that were collected from that very same big old cypress that I shared in my last photo. So really the intention with the Arboretum Heritage Project moving forward is not just to be propagating and replanting companion trees with the same species of tree, but to actually be collecting seeds from old trees that are living on the property and to plant companions with the direct offspring of those trees. And we're extending that mission this fall, or we will be extending that mission this fall with our planting efforts with other species even beyond the Monterey cypress. So I'm very excited to continue that companion tree planting in the seasons ahead. I will wrap up my talk and open it up to questions by just saying that I think one of the most rewarding aspects of my care for Cypress Lawn Arboretum is beyond just arboriculture practice, the storytelling about trees. I would love for anyone that's sitting in on this call to subscribe to the Branching Out Arboretum newsletter, which is a seasonal or quarterly newsletter that I work on. And as a part of that newsletter, we actually have a YouTube channel. If you just go on YouTube and type in Cypress Lawn Arboretum, you'll see some of these videos. There's a screen capture of it there. And also nested within the newsletter is the Dancing on the Brink of the World blog series, which is all about my particular affinity for the Monterey cypress, which just so happens to be my favorite species of tree. That blog series lives as a virtual exhibit on our Heritage Foundation website. The Monterey cypress, while it's native only to a small pocket of the California coast at Point Lobos and Pebble Beach, it's been planted by people and is very significant cultural tree all around the world, including in parts of the Commonwealth, most notably New Zealand and Australia. So with that, I will pause in my sharing, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of great questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So I'll just start with Elizabeth's question. Are there any coast redwoods on your property? And were there any problems with them with last year's storms?
Yeah, we do have a few coast redwoods, Sequoia sempervirens. I think there are less than 15, I would say, on the entire property. We haven't experienced any major failure events in coast redwoods over the past 2 years. I will say that the microclimate of Colma is not particularly suitable for redwoods due to the wind that we get. I don't think that results in complete failures of the trees, but what does happen is wind shear will result in kind of natural topping of the plants where they just don't get to the typical height that you would like to see of a kind of a typical redwood. They
Mhm.
kind of max out at about, I would say, 40 or 50 feet in height, and then they have this kind of strange stunted character to them. So
Mhm.
that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. Some folks had questions about the mulch ring that you
Yeah.
do. How do you create it in turf? How do you weed it and how frequently? And just like maintenance around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually the most recent YouTube video we put out is all about the practice of making a mulch ring through a root crown excavation, which actually utilizes a tool called an air spade or air knife, which is a pressurized pneumatic kind of air tool that can blast away the excess soil that is suffocating the root system or maybe suffocating the root system. Um, actually, what's really interesting is we've kind of developed a species by species metric for the PSI that we use the air knife at, so that it does blast away the soil, but it doesn't damage the roots themselves. So there's kind of a fine tuning of that process. In terms of the maintenance of the mulch rings, that definitely is a collaborative process, which I think would benefit in the long term from volunteer care, or um, expanding beyond just the kind of maintenance and stewardship that we're able to manage in-house at Cypress Lawn with our grounds team. But I think I would say a mulch ring really needs to be weeded, especially one at this scale. I would say seasonally. And the earlier you do it, the better, of course. Weeding is easier when you do it earlier.
Mm-hmm. And how do you remove your turf? Like, do you use sheet mulch or do you physically remove it? Or
Um, well, I mean, you can kind of use the pneumatic, the air spade tool to facilitate that.
Mhm.
But I would say the first process of kind of peeling back the turf is mostly done with shovels,
Okay.
kind of manual labor.
Um, great. Do you use a database to track the dates and health of all your trees, or how do you monitor? There's so many trees you're keeping track of.
Yes, we do. So we do have a GIS database of our entire living collection. And the tree risk assessment survey folds into that. And that's utilized to inform which trees are priorities for maintenance, and then tracking that as we go in the inventory database is
Cool.
essential work.
And do you have any recommendations on how to decide how tall of a spar or snag to leave after a tree dies?
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating question. I've been in touch with a number of consulting arborists about that. There's actually been bird observation studies conducted. I'm not super familiar with it, but to determine kind of which species will settle or perch on a spar of certain heights. Um,
Mm,
so over 25 feet, to my understanding, is the perch height for most raptors. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert. But I think it's really cool to observe, and I do most days. Some of the habitat spars we've left behind are frequented quite often by a number of different species.
cool. So these are more specific questions if you can offer insight. Someone asked about a young to cut cypress that has brown leaves, wondering if it's from too much water from the last 2 years. Will it recover? So brown leaves on a young cypress.
Hmm. Um,
Pretty specific.
yeah, well, I mean, generally speaking, in my experience, when leaves have gone brown, that they're already past the point of being recoverable. If that's kind of only within one particular part of the tree, as in like one branch system, um, I think there still is hope. But in my own experience, I haven't worked particularly with Tecate cypresses, but with the Monterey cypress, anytime you see kind of browning of foliage throughout the canopy, um, the tree is already on its way to passing.
Mm-hmm. And someone asked back to the coastal redwoods. They've had redwoods fall with the winds. Is there any way to support those trees or signs to look for that the tree may fall?
Hmm, that's a good question. The root systems of redwoods are quite anatomically different from the Monterey cypress. They're very fibrous and widespreading right on the surface in that kind of top 6 inches to a foot of the soil depth. Um, in my own experience, it is really difficult to predict when those root failures will occur. Um, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a challenging thing. I think yeah, I don't know. I think unfortunately redwoods in the urban environment can be a very challenging tree to work with
Yeah.
um, when they're in proximity to structures.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really scary.
Yeah. Someone asked about what kind of mulch to use for the rings
Mhm.
and how thick of a layer of mulch you use.
Yeah, so we have a recycling program on site. So all of the mulch that is utilized in mulch rings on the grounds comes from, trees and branches that have been removed in recent seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, like for this mulch ring in particular, we did use exclusively Monterey cypress chips, which is a pretty cool thing to kind of pass along um, the life from one generation to the next. Was there another part of that question about mulch?
Um, Chips versus chunky pieces.
Hmm. Um, well, depends on the size of the chunk.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say, wood chips that have come through just a standard chipper are generally speaking of a good size, especially if the equipment's being maintained well. The problem with really big chunks of wood is that they will take much, much, much longer to decompose.
Mm-hmm.
So those available nutrients, in particular nitrogen, that's in those chips will just take longer to get into the plant that the mulch ring is around.
Mm-hmm. And what's the depth that you use for the mulch? Like how many
Yeah,
inches?
generally I would say if you had to pick one depth, I would say 4 inches. But between 3 and 6 inches is a good amount. You really, and another benefit of mulch that I didn't really mention when I was initially sharing is the moisture conservation that it allows. If you just have bare earth, if we were to keep it as this little where it says drip line there,
Mhm.
if we exposed the roots, removed the turf to kind of allow for the boundary from that mechanical damage, but we just left it bare with no mulch, those surface roots would be exposed to a lot of potential for drying out. So that mulch, a thick mulch layer, maybe about 4 inches in depth, will keep the soil moist and uh, kind of mitigate the need for irrigation.
Mhm. Thanks for answering that. Can you describe how you recognize when a tree is just dying as opposed to just struggling? Is there like a way for you to determine that? Like you
Yeah.
mentioned the brown leaves, but
I mean, I
honest.
think that's a pretty profound question, I would say.
Yeah.
Uh, difficult to answer simply. I think my own experience of kind of coming into my comfort zone as an arborist has been through a long time of subliminal lessons. You learn a bit and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. Um, so in terms of like evaluating whether a tree is kind of past the point of recoverability, that will depend on the species. It will depend on kind of your own experience. Yeah, I don't think there really is a simple answer, but I think I am able to tell when there is like an explicit hazard in a tree, like one branch, oh, there's a crack there, or it's codominant and the union is unsound. Um, there are things that you can identify and learn bit by bit over time through the practice of arboriculture to help identify when something can be proactively done to save a tree.
Hmm. Um, and once you remove your lawn and a mulch ring is created under the tree, do you continue to irrigate the tree? How do you do it? Or do you install separate irrigation just for that tree? Maybe it depends.
That's a very good question. I would say it does depend.
Yeah.
For a lot of the new plantings we're doing, we'll irrigate individual trees with like a gator bag that will be installed at the time of planting.
Hmm.
And maybe we'll fill that once a week during the dry summer season. The water irrigation system at Cypress Lawn is a very old kind of legacy system dating back decades and decades. We do have well water, or we have a well on site and groundwater access, um, which is definitely a privilege, not a right, in my mind. And I think that I would love to see proactive measures undertaken over the coming years to um, be really thoughtful about conserving the water that we do use.
Yeah, and speaking of watering, how does summer turf affect watering trees? And
It can
how do you,
be, yeah,
Mhm.
it can be really problematic. Overwatering is definitely an issue for some species. I would say most notably, there's this one individual coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, on our East Campus that when I came on board was getting just blasted on the trunk with like a rainbird, like over kind of overhead emitter that would pop up. And so we actually put up a little protector around like one portion of kind of the radial circulation of that irrigator, I guess, so that the water is not just overwhelming that tree. Um, but yeah, it can certainly be an issue, and I think that's also shown and demonstrated over the years, like which species are more tolerant of that summer irrigation. Some of which are non-native, and those are just the trees that have stood the test of time.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, One more question. Not sure if you could answer this, but it's about mature madrone trees. Care on like pre-active and proactive care on mature madrones as the old specimens are leaning, as madrones do. Um, I don't know if you have madrone. Do you have any madrones out there?
Well, we do have a few of it's called
Marina?
Strawberry,
Yeah.
which is it's a cultivar of
Mhm.
Arbutus. We do not have any native madrones on the property. In my own arboriculture practice, I haven't really worked with that species much. So I don't know if my expertise would really convey much. Um, sorry, not specifically.
No, that's great. Yeah, I know it's hard to, yeah, I mean, so many trees out there.
Indeed.
Maybe talking about mulching and pruning of native oaks, in the coastal versus inland hotter areas of California, or just talk about maybe your experience with caring for native oaks.
Yeah, so actually, this past fall, and I will say fall is the right time of year annually to plant trees in California. Uh,
Mhm.
we celebrate at Cypress Lawn Arboretum Day, which is kind of our tree planting celebration holiday every November, right at the start of California's rainy season,
Mhm.
to hopefully have trees healthfully establish over the winter through just nature's irrigation, rain. This past fall, we planted 100 oak trees. I collaborated with a guy by the name of Dave Muffley, who his website about all about oak trees is just fascinating. Oaktopia, it's called. But he helped to curate a list of kind of climatically suitable oak trees for kind of the Colma microclimate. And those species aren't necessarily California natives, and some of them are hybrids, but some of them are European oak species. Um, but we've planted quite a number of oaks just in the past year, which I'm pretty excited about. I don't know if there was a more to answer from that question. I,
They were, yeah, talking about just recommendations with mulching and pruning.
mulching and pruning of oaks in particular.
Hmm.
Um, well, I mean, California native oaks, in particular, have definitely evolved in that Mediterranean climate regime, of not receiving summer irrigation or summer water.
Yeah.
That's an important thing to note. I think, they definitely will benefit from having mulch, in their understory. Um, Pruning of oaks, man, it can be really involved. Just also again due to the scale of some of the oak species that we have. It's not a native oak, but Quercus suber, the cork oak, um, that I referenced at the very beginning of my talk. I can pull it up again. Um, that kind of smaller lower left image. Um, that that tree was actually the very first it was kind of a hallmark tree in terms of the elements of proactive stewardship that we can do as arborists. It was the first tree that we did a root crown excavation for. It was the first tree that we installed pipe supports on. And it was the first tree that we did kind of an overall canopy, uh, what you might call like a crown cleaning of dead wood. Not that all dead wood needs to be eliminated, but hazardous dead wood probably should be removed, generally speaking. Um, yeah, but I think oaks can be, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, can be some of the most wonderful trees to proactively steward, because they create habitat for so many things. They can be such statement trees in the landscape as that one cork oak is.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that. Do you fertilize the lawn and therefore the trees, or how does fertilizer impact your trees?
Um, Great question. So to my knowledge, we do not fertilize the lawn at Cypress Lawn. Um, for establishing trees in particular, I am a big fan of slow release fertilizers that, the beads. Osmocote is a wonderful brand, where those critical macronutrients and PK will be released into the soil every time watering takes place. Um, so I especially use that kind of in the establishing period for new plantings. Generally speaking, not right at the time of planting, because that transplant shock, those roots right at the edge of the root ball, can be really vulnerable to fertilizer burn. But once the tree has had a few weeks, maybe a month or two, to kind of get its footing, and coming back around with some fertilizer, like Osmocote, to facilitate that establishment period, can be really, really valuable.
Any other questions? I gotta turn the light on in my room. Um, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and just going through all these questions that I'm throwing at you. It's been so informative and so helpful. And yeah, these slides will be available, and any other resources, Josh, that you send to me, I'll send out to everyone that registered for the webinar, including, links to your website and your YouTube channel and social media and all of those things. And yeah, thank you
Happy
so
to share.
much. Yeah, I think we're covered all the topics and all the questions. So really appreciate your time. And next month we'll be talking about the new cowscape. So look out for that. That'll be an exciting talk as well. And yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for everyone that tuned in, and see you all next month.
Thank you all very much. Take
Thank
care.
you. Oh, also really quick, is there any way that people can, like, is there a self-guided tree tour of the Arboretum, or ways that people can visit?
Absolutely. So a number of things. I will say, if you go onto our Heritage Foundation website, there is kind of an events page there where you can RSVP for any Arboretum programming I may be hosting. I would say mark your calendars for Arboretum Day this coming November. It'll be on Saturday the 16th. Really looking forward to that. That'll be our 5th annual Arboretum Day. We do have self-guided kind of paper brochures. I don't think I have any right here. But those are available at the kind of main reception desk at Cypress Lawn, the main office kind of lobby, at 1370 El Camino Real in Colma. And I guess one plug, which will be coming this spring. In May, we will be launching kind of the second generation of our virtual Arboretum experience, which I'm working on currently in ArcGIS Experience Builder, and that will be a host for many different stories about our trees, and you'll be able to see photos and videos kind of nested within. But that also features the inventory from that tree risk assessment conducted in 2023 of all of our mature and post-mature trees. So you can kind of pan around through a map, and experience the Arboretum in that way as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll link to all of that in the follow-up email with the recording and everything as well.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and everyone have a great rest of your evening. Yeah, take care.